Summertime is heating up at Global Voice Broadcasting. Hot music, hot talk, and hot topics. All day, every day, 24/7. You don't want to miss a minute on Global Voice Broadcasting.
I highly recommend Ms. Hicks. Her books, her CDs are encouraging.
I bought her book, A Hill to Climb. She's a very inspirational speaker.
And I look forward to one day being able to work with her.
Your power lies within you. Let it loose.
Aspiration, inspiration, motivation, edification, determination. These are the keys of life success, brought to you by none other than award-winning author, motivational lecturer, business consultant, and much more as she gets you aimed to your purpose. And now, ladies and gentlemen, young and elder, from Hollywood to the entire world, here is your host of Aim to Purpose, the radio show, Louise Hicks, along with her co-host, yours truly, Kennon Wesley Mason.
Hello, world. How is everybody? Again, thank you all for joining us for another edition of Aim to Purpose, the radio show, and I'm your host, Louise Hicks.
And I am your co-host, Kennon Mason, and as always, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone listening and watching Aim to Purpose, the radio show from all over the world as we welcome you here at Global Voice Broadcasting. Today we bring you another special edition as we call this Race, Power, and Politics, a conversation with our special guest today, Michael McCray.
And we are looking forward to Michael sharing information with us when we talk about this book a little bit later in the show. And very powerful book, ACORN, Race, Power, and Politics. Memoirs of an ACORN Whistleblower As Told by Marcel Reid, authored by Michael McCray. But before we get into our show today and introduce our special guest, we want to acknowledge the shooting over the weekend. I mean, it was really a tragedy down in Orlando, Florida, where, it has been reported by the news media that 50 people thus far, I believe, have lost their lives in a shooting in a gay bar. And what an atrocity. It's so sad, and we'd like to express our condolences to all of the families of the victims of this horrific shooting. So sad. And before we get into the show, also, before we introduce Michael McCray, we want to just talk a little bit about these terrorist events that are going on. It seems that it's becoming more prevalent here in the United States, and we'd like to get some answers. So fortunately for us, we have a terror specialist on the line that we'd like to talk to and see about getting some answers. And I want to tell you a little bit about attorney J. Michael Springman, who we hope to have on the show at some point in time as a guest, but he was a U.S. State Department representative in the Middle East, from what I understand, and he's written a powerful book. I hope to get the book and read it and have Attorney Springman on the show, but it's called Visas for Al-Qaeda. And he's questioned a lot of the things that are going on with visas being issued, and apparently, from what I understand, Attorney Springman lost his job as a result. But since he is a terror specialist, we want to bring him on the line for about 10 minutes or so and find out a little bit more and get some insight from him about what is going on. So, Michael, are you there? Mike,
yes, I
should say.
I'm very pleased and grateful for the opportunity to speak to your listeners.
Thank you so much for coming on. The weekend has really kind of gone in a whirlwind, if you will, with this particular tragedy that's happened, and we want you to shed some light on your take on this and how it relates to what we've been hearing over the last decade plus, the word terrorism and how it's affected all of us, not only here in America, but around the world.
Yes. Could you give us some insight?
Sure. Essentially, my book, Visas for Al-Qaeda, CIA Handouts That Rock the World, pretty much tied the United States government to international terrorism in South Asia, Southwest Asia, North Africa, and the Balkans. The United States created a cadre of terrorists, beginning with the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and rebranding them successively as Al-Qaeda and as ISIL or ISIS or Daesh or whatever you want to call them. And I think a lot of this somehow is wrapped up in what went on in Orlando over the weekend. I did some quick research this morning and found out, for example, this Omar fellow, Satine, he had worked for G4S Security, which bought up Wackenhut. And Wackenhut was an old organization begun by the FBI special agents, which hired U.S. government officials such as retired generals and bringing in CIA and FBI staff, former director of the FBI, former CIA director Bobby Ray Inman, before Bill Casey, for example, became head of the CIA. He was of counsel to the organization. Wackenhut and now G4S put a lot of these CIA clandestine service officers into jobs in the company where they could engage in clandestine activity, generally to the detriment of American and other governments. They even were involved with Iran-Contra. And I find it more than a little peculiar that this guy was, who had been investigated repeatedly by the FBI, had been hired by G4S, and that his father had ties to support for Taliban, had attempted to run for president of Afghanistan. And all of Omar Satine's friends and relatives said the guy was really strange. His former wife said that she was afraid for her life living with him. So this whole thing fits a questionable pattern of these mass shootings, of a lot of information being given out about the number of dead, the number of wounded, issues with really unattractive firearms being used to kill these people, and then finding out later on that the fellow had gotten the weapons legally. There was something wrong with his mind. Everybody knew he was wrong in the head, but nevertheless, he was given positions of power and authority as a security guard, for example, in this case, with G4S. So I think we really need to ask more questions and find out why we're not getting the straight story and why the information is coming out in dribs and drabs.
Right.
And it always seems to come out in drips and drabs, and you know, it is election time right now, and typically when there's election time, something like this will happen before or after an election. They call them false flag operations. Now, I don't know if this was one of them, but it does seem kind of peculiar, as you said, that something like this is happening and they're giving us all these tidbits of information in this short period of time.
And so true, and particularly, like you said, Attorney Springman, about them having access to this guy and still nothing, he was allowed to just run amok. That's interesting also.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So when you were working for the, what is it, the department in the Middle East, you did question them issuing, the government, you're talking about the government, right? Issuing visas.
Right. Yeah.
And what happened with that?
Okay, well, essentially, somebody applying for a visa to come to the United States has to show that he has enough ties to his own country or the country where he's applying for the visa that will compel him to return once he went to see Disneyland, concluded a business deal, or visited friends and relatives. And the people I was refusing repeatedly One fellow was Sudanese, a refugee from the Sudan and unemployed in Saudi Arabia. Well, the CIA official in the political section wanted him to go to the United States, but wouldn't tell me why. Other people, they were Pakistanis, I think, wanted to go to a trade show in the United States, but couldn't name the trade show, and couldn't tell me the city where it was being held. But I was repeatedly told by J. Philip Freres, who now is dead after being struck by lightning last year,
oh my God,
to issue these visas, or else I won't have a job with the State Department.
Oh, wow. And because you questioned that and you didn't want these visas, but they're going to override it and you lose your job.
Yeah, sure. And they were overriding it because I had the final determination, unless they had information I didn't have access to, that could overturn my decision. And that's against the law. And the fact that what they were doing, as I found out later, they were recruiting for the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. They were coming to the United States for training, debriefings,
and
whatever.
When you say were recruiting, who are you referring to?
The United States government was recruiting terrorists to go to Afghanistan and fight the Soviet army.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to clarify who the they is,
Sure.
because I know there's a lot of corruption in our government, and people are losing their jobs because they are coming forward. Not only losing their jobs, people are losing their lives because they are bringing and outing out the truth about how corrupt our government is. And it happened a lot with that 9/11. And I know briefly, because I know we're running out of time. Pardon me?
Yeah.
I know with Donald Trump made an interesting, as he usually does, he's at it again. He's talking about some things that the President Obama should resign or so forth, because him coming out and not wanting to talk about radical Islam, from what I understand he's saying. Give us just briefly your thought on that, what Donald Trump, Hillary, and just the election per se.
Well, I mean, I saw the statement from Donald Trump, and the best I can say is it's absolute nonsense for the most part. Hillary Clinton is no better. I mean, she's a self-confessed murderer, war criminal, and human rights violator, having destroyed Libya and Syria.
Right.
So, the election is not looking good, and nobody seems to want to criticize anything other than tangential issues.
Right. And always want to bring, there's specific words that always that they know will get the people riled up. And radical Islam is one of those phrases. Radical Islam, terrorists, it's in our consciousness now, and it has been. And it's something that keeps the American people on edge. We always have to have
the fear alive.
That's right. We always have to have, as Jesse Ventura always says, we always have to have a boogeyman.
Yep.
It's a distraction from what all the corruption that our government is perpetrating.
And guess what?
I feel.
And guess what? This happened just a couple of days after Muhammad Ali was buried, when they had he had people from all over the world, including people from Muslim faiths, come and celebrate his life. And now we have this, the total opposite, going back to we need to hate Muslims, and everyone that comes from a Muslim faith has to be a terrorist.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing how they have demonized Islam, and it's a religion essentially of peace.
Right.
Absolutely. And it's all by design. But we thank you so much, Attorney Springman, for coming on and sharing that information. And we will have you back. I want your book. It's just amazing, all of the things that are going on, and with the American public being blindsided, bamboozled, brainwashed, and everything by our own government. And it's so sad, because we should be free and liberated, but we really aren't. So we thank you so much for coming on and sharing that information. And we definitely want to bring you back and talk more about terrorism, because it's right here on our own soil, within our own government. And that's so sad. Yeah. So thank you again.
I'd be honored to do so. And I thank you for the opportunity tonight to talk to you.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You know, it's, again, we have to keep going back to the way media, our quote mainstream media, the way they spin the today's topics. You know, they want us to think a certain way. They want us to feel a certain way. They want our emotions riled up. And the best and easiest way to do that is to bring up this kind of stuff. Terrorism.
That's exactly.
And name calling and labeling radical Islams.
That's exactly what they do. So with that being said, again, we'd like to thank Attorney Springman, J. Springman, I want to make sure.
J. Michael Springman.
J. Michael Springman for coming on and sharing a little bit. He's a terror specialist, so he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah,
and
we
to
gotta have
lose
him
your
back.
job over telling the truth is ridiculous, but that's what has happened. And it kind of segues us into our topic for today with the next attorney that we're going to have up after we take a break. And when we talk about race, power, and politics, a conversation with Michael McCray. So let's take our break, and we're going to come back and we're going to introduce you to our broadcast guest today.
Hello, world! On behalf of everyone at Aim to Purpose, the radio show, we want to thank you, the viewing and listening audience around the world, for tuning in each and every week to experience the best in the internet radio hemisphere, listen to the best in life-altering information, and feel the energy of each guest as they share personal stories and in-depth knowledge on a wide variety of topics intended to capture your interest and keep your attention span at an all-time high. Aim to Purpose, the radio show, is about enlightenment, opening the mind to new ideas, and challenging the status quo. It's also about elevation, success, honesty, and universal truth as we enjoy free-flowing conversation in a fun-filled environment. So tell everyone you know to tune in each week and plug into the A2P universe. Your power lies within you, so let it loose. This is Kennon Mason, co-host of Aim to Purpose, the radio show.
Hello, world. Hello again. I'm Louise Hicks, your host, along with my co-host and my son, Kennon Wesley Mason. And we have a great show. We, again, want to send our condolences out to all the families and the victims of the Orlando. And if you heard at the top of the show, we had Attorney J. Michael Springman talking about that and giving us some insight, because he is a terror specialist, and we're going to definitely have him back on the show. We have to talk some more about his book and everything else. But for now, we're going to bring on our special guest for today, and we're going to talk some about race, power, and politics.
Yes, Michael McCray is a dedicated human rights and public interest advocate. A Howard University, American University, and Georgetown Law alumnus, Michael began his career in public service as a community and economic development specialist who pioneered new technologies at the U.S. Department of Agriculture for the White House Empowerment Zones initiative under the Clinton administration. Committed to youth and education, Michael McCray is a graduate professor who teaches community development and community development finance at the Prairie View A&M University Graduate School of Community Development, an award-winning public interest activist and author of Race, Power, and Politics, Memoirs of an ACORN Whistleblower. Michael McCray's signature events are standing room only. Michael teaches his unique method of packaging and placement for capital formation to help nonprofits, small businesses, churches, and community organizations to help them leverage and profit from their unique competitive advantages. A national board member of Federal Employed Women League Education Fund and former national board delegate for Georgia ACORN, which stands for the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now. Michael McCray champions national issues such as federal workers' rights, fair lending and mortgage fraud, and judicial reform. Michael McCray is a recurring opinion columnist for the SCLC magazine and is a freelance writer whose column, The McCray Way, discusses community and economic development issues related to Southeast Arkansas. Michael believes that selflessness and civic activism are where the healing process and transformation begins. So let's have a warm, aim to purpose welcome to our special guest, Mr. Michael McCray.
Hello, Michael. How are you? And welcome to the show today. It's amazing. We will have spoken to two attorneys in the same day, and we thank you for coming on the show. But you heard us speak with Attorney Springman because we wanted to share and shed a little light on that situation that occurred. What a tragedy, a horrific tragedy down in Orlando, Florida, with the shooting in the gay bar over the weekend. And if you want to say something, I like what you said here, your quote about selflessness and civic activism are where the healing process and transformation begins. And you have that tell it like it is approach. And I like that because that's what Aim to Purpose, the radio show, is all about. Tell it like it is. And we are here to enlighten, empower, and educate. I love those 3 E's, enlighten, empower, and educate. And that's what we're all about. But if you want to, before we get into the whistleblowing, if you want to chime in and have something to say quickly about the Orlando or Donald Trump situation, what he's talking about, feel free.
Well, thank you, Louise. I mean, of course, it's my heart goes out to the family members and everyone who was impacted by that senseless loss, that senseless killing. I mean, it's devastating. I just happened to have the pleasure of attending a White House lawn party today, well, a few hours ago. And President Barack Obama gave such eloquent words and remarks, and very responsible remarks concerning, what was going on at the Pulse nightclub and what's been happening in the gay and lesbian community. And so it was really, to me, it was really refreshing to hear somebody speak about it in a firm but respectful way that was sensitive to issues of the community, and then also where we need to go in terms of battling terrorism and homophobia. Mm-hmm. And so when I read you shared an excerpt with me with Donald Trump. Wow, I can't believe Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee, had to say. And once again, he seems to, he jumps the shark. And this kind of knee-jerk, his reflexive response is to invoke racism, bigotry, and hatred. That's right. And at the time when the incident first occurred, we didn't really. Right now, he's trying to force the president to say, I think, Islamic terrorism or Islamic radicalism, something along those natures. And to my knowledge, at the time, we really don't know who the shooter is or what his ties to, whether that's Islam or ISIS. This could be. I mean, he has that type of surname, but I don't know if he's a practicing Muslim or not, or right. And this could really be garden variety homophobia. So it's really irresponsible to have such a knee-jerk reflexive response, that which Donald Trump took, and it was very refreshing to once again to see our president make us proud. Mm-hmm. And to give, as Attorney Springman, who's the terror specialist, had said, we're getting all these tidbits, so we really don't know very much. But I'm sure there will be more to come on this horrific tragedy. But let's get into the whistleblowing here. So you are a whistleblower along with several others, and I know the ACORN was a hot issue back in the day when President Barack Obama was running for president. That's when I started hearing a lot about the ACORN organization, the Association of Community Organizations for Reform, now as it is the name, but the acronym is ACORN. So
As a whistleblower, I know you had said we want you to tell the story about how you became a whistleblower. You worked for the USDA, and you can tell us what USDA is an acronym for. But you, I guess it was something about $40 million. So you want to share that with us and give us the background on that?
Absolutely. And they actually intersect. So, Louise, I tell people a funny thing happened to me on my way to Wall Street. And what happened was my governor ran for president, and he won. And so I'm from a small town in the Arkansas Delta region, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And my hometown happens to have been ranked the worst place to live in America 2 years in a row. And so I kind of grew up in an area that was very underserved, and I was able to get out through education. I went to Florida A&M. I was in the famed business school, and I went on to law school at Georgetown, where I was working on the JD and MBA. But during that time, then Governor Clinton ran for president, and he won. And so at that point in time, I was a student volunteer, like a lot of the young people that got involved in President Obama's campaign. It was new to me, but I was a student organizer, and when after that victory, I wound up getting the opportunity to work for the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And I'm sure that we all know about the problems that the black farmers have faced for years and years with discrimination, but most people really don't understand how powerful USDA really is. And I mean, it's an organization that was founded by Abraham Lincoln following the Civil War, and it was really during the period of Reconstruction. And so it was the agency that was basically put together in order to rebuild a country that had been destroyed by the war between the North and the South. And so if you think about it, at that point in time, we hadn't gotten into really manufacturing. So the U.S. economy was very agrarian-based. So when you start to talk about the Department of Agriculture back then, that meant the Department of everything. Mm-hmm. And so there are loan programs at USDA that are better than ones at HUD. There are business loan programs at USDA that are better than the ones at SBA. As a matter of fact, a lot of people don't know, but Prince, who recently passed away, some of the financing that he got for Paisley Park Studios came out of USDA. And so it's a program that's got foreign ag services, almost like a little mini State Department. So the reach, and there are extension agents in every county in the country that work with all the A&M universities, all the Prairie View A&M, the Texas A&M, all those agriculture and mechanical universities are land-grant institutions tied to USDA. So there has a tremendous amount of power, and one of the problem that I ran into was it has a culture, a good old boys culture. Mm-hmm. And so we can see discrimination that was facing the black farmers, but it's kind of like the same officers and the same managers that were discriminating against the black farmers, they were discriminating in the housing programs. They were discriminating in the business programs. And so that was one of the things that I encountered. But anyway, making a long story short, I wound up with the opportunity to work for USDA and rural development on the Federal Empowerment Zones program. You may remember it was called EZEC, Empowerment Zones in Enterprise Communities. And so This was the largest community development package since Lyndon Johnson's Great Society program. So the grants ranged from $3 million all the way up to $100 million. And these programs were designed to go to revitalize underserved areas, really just like my hometown. Right. So it was amazing to me because I was able to package, my desire to get into finance and real estate, with economic development. And so the stuff that I thought I wanted to do on Wall Street, I really wanted to try to do on Main Street and in places like my hometown. And so I was very passionate. I was very fortunate. I was going to Georgetown Law School at night, and I was working on a White House initiative during the daytime. And life was great. I came from a very underserved place in America, and I literally had the keys to the White House.
Now, when was this, Michael?
This was between 1994 and 1998.
Okay.
But Louise, little did I know that it would be so fleeting, because one of the things that happened with the grant application that I was in charge of securing the grant applications because of my my educational background with finance and an MBA. I had been pulled on a team to create a document, a workflow, so that we could keep up with all the applications, process them, break them down, have them scored and ranked so that they could go on into the evaluation process. Again, long story short, there was one grant application that I was aware of that it wasn't a grant-worthy application. It was literally something that was kind of thrown together at the last minute, but it was awarded $40 million.
Wow.
And the reason being, it was they had political connections to then Secretary Mike Espy. And so how I wound up becoming a whistleblower, I just asked the wrong question at the wrong time. And that was during the staff meeting. I was like, gosh, should we really give $40 million to a nonprofit organization that doesn't have the financial controls to manage it? And what that did is it started to change the course of my life, because, again, I was then viewed as somebody who kind of didn't go along to get along, and that I was aware that there was some malfeasance going on, and I spoke out against it. So I started to suffer retaliation, as many whistleblowers do, and ultimately I wound up filing a series of whistleblower and retaliation complaints against USDA. Fast forwarding, without telling you how all of that stuff ended, by me becoming a whistleblower, I also got involved in the whistleblower community. I got involved in public advocacy work. So I've always I know a lot of times whistleblowers view themselves as in a huge David and Goliath type battle against against the man.
Right.
But I viewed it that way as well for a long time. But I needed to move from being me focused to what can we do for society? What does my story?
Right.
How can my other people? So I would tell people. I also do public speaking. I tell people, to be the rock, and what I mean is that to get out of the mindset that you're David fighting the corporation that is Goliath, or fighting the government that's Goliath. David is the establishment is Goliath. Use your story. Use your whatever, your tragedy as the rock, so that you can use it as a tool to help other people. And so that's that's where, when I say that, that's really where the healing begins. Once you step outside of yourself and start to use your to put a purpose to your pain. And
Absolutely.
So I started to do that, and that's when I met Marcel Reid. She was on we actually were on the National ACORN Board of Directors together, and she kind of got to know me and kind of got to know my story. I had recently moved as a result of the retaliation from USDA. I wound up moving to Atlanta, and I was working with a small boutique hotel company that was the first African-American owned hotel company that purchased a historic hotel on Peachtree Street in Atlanta in 1999. And the owner, my business partner, a man by the name of Mr. Courtney Dillard, became one of the early victims of what we now recognize as commercial mortgage fraud. Back then, we didn't even know what to call it, Louise. We were calling it a loan-to-own scheme. But that's one of the ways when this happened to us, and we're like, look, if somebody can actually steal a hotel on Peachtree Street, that there's a lot of fraud and waste that's going on. The system is corrupt.
Oh, yes.
And so that's how I became involved with the financial literacy and the mortgage fraud activism. So ultimately, we wound up going to ACORN for help. We'd gone to the NAACP. They didn't return our phone calls.
I know that story. I have a story on that one, too, the NAACP. Go ahead.
We went to the SCLC, and they helped us for a little while, but then they either got reached out to, connected, or they kind of fell by the wayside. And I write about this, and this is part of the stuff that I write about in the book, Race, Power, and Politics, as to why I got involved with ACORN and why people get involved with ACORN. And so I wound up going to the Association of Community Organizations for Reform Now, which was originally the Arkansas Community Organizations for Reform Now, and it was actually ACORN was actually founded in Little Rock. which was about 45 minutes from my hometown.
Mm-hmm.
So I got involved in ACORN. That's how I met Marcel Reid. And later on, when she discovered, or she was brought into a situation where she had to rectify a multi-million-dollar embezzlement, she called me because she knew I was, one, I'm a person of the people. Two, she knew that I had a background in law and finance and, was a, JD CPA. So that's kind of how we got together, and that's kind of how our ACORN journey started together. She knew that I had a history of standing up for what was right, having been a federal whistleblower, and that I had the skills and expertise to help her decipher what was going on in ACORN.
Oh, wow. What a story, I tell you. And you are so right on target about everything you've said. I, as a black woman that worked here in Los Angeles, even though I'm from Louisiana, I worked in the county of Los Angeles government for 32 years. And I tell you, I have a story to tell as well. And I do briefly talk about it sometimes on this show. And you made a powerful statement where you said, put a purpose to your pain. And did you coin that one? I love it.
I didn't coin it. That actually a friend of mine. She's in our whistleblower network. Tanya Ward Jordan. She's the president of Coalition for Change. But
Tanya Ward Jordan.
Tanya Ward Jordan.
Okay.
And she's one of the co-hosts when we have our annual Whistleblower Summit for Civil and Human Rights in Washington D.C. Actually on Capitol Hill. We have it every year, and she's one of the co-hosts, and she's a lead co-host, and she's a leader in our whistleblower and First Amendment community. And so we do a lot of work together. But that's one of her phrases.
Well, I love it because you do have to put a purpose to your pain, and I know that all too well firsthand because I had to do the same thing. I don't have a law degree. However, I had to practice law in pro per against the county of Los Angeles and won because of racism and what I endured during my time frame in Los Angeles County, the county of Los Angeles workforce. And I think that's why I'm here today, is putting a purpose to my pain of the things that I went through. And when I read this book, and I'm going to hold it up again, Race, Power, and Politics, Memoirs of an ACORN Whistleblower as Told by Marcel Reid, but it's authored by Michael McCray, attorney Michael McCray. And this is a very empowering and a powerful book because it helps you to understand, like you said, you may not be that Goliath, but be the rock. And we all need to start being the rock, because in reading this book, and I can attest to being 65, I remember and I go back, I have so much understanding and exposure to a lot of things from firsthand experience myself. And reading this book, when I heard all this commotion, and I didn't know who ACORN was until I believe they started talking about the scandal. And what was so disturbing to me was when I saw it on mainstream media, all I saw was affiliated with the ACORN situation were black faces and black people. And I'm saying the propaganda and the mainstream media led us to believe as the masses that all of this perpetration was by black people who had fraudulently taken this ACORN organization to scandal. And that is not the case. Is that correct?
No, that's absolutely correct. That was the reason, Louise, that was the reason I wrote the book. Is having been involved with what was going on and, standing up for what was right, what I was watching on television had nothing to do with reality.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, and so what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to make it a really heavy book. What I wanted to do was kind of tell a story, but I started off wanting to set the record straight as to what really happened. But then I got in the process of writing, because I know that you write and that sometimes your projects start to take on a life of their own. I wanted to fill in the backstory so that people would first have to understand, why would you get involved with an organization like ACORN? Why was direct action organizations even necessary? So what I wanted to do was tell the story of the perspective of people that were true believers that joined ACORN for all the right reasons, then started to slowly uncover and discover what was really going on, the fraud and the corruption that existed within the organization. And now, mind you, Louise, our purpose was to reform the organization so that it wouldn't have had to actually, hit the bricks. We were actually trying to save ACORN from itself. And what happened was the group, the courageous whistleblowers that on the board that were known as the ACORN 8, we got rebuffed by the managers and the senior staff that had kind of benefited from some of the corruption and the shenanigans and the embezzlement that had taken place. So it's the story of discovery. It's the story of how direct action organizations can be empowering, but then also how they can be abused, and what real people have to do to try to fight for their rights and to force ACORN to live up to the mission that it was founded to serve.
Mm-hmm. And the thing, and what was so disturbing to me when I was hearing all of this back then in like mid-2000, I guess, is when it really came to the forefront, this scandal, and I started seeing all these black faces associated with that. And I'm thinking there has to be some higher authorities and powers other than these black people that they were showing, because these black people that I was listening to, I said, I know they could not orchestrate all of this embezzlement and fraud. And then as I started reading more and realizing that it was nothing but an exploitation, this organization is almost 50 years old. I don't think it's in existence anymore. It's been dissolved and so forth. Is that correct?
Well, it's debatable. The first question you should start off with is what is ACORN?
Yeah.
You look at is ACORN just the corporate shell, or is ACORN all the assets and the resources and the expertise and the people and the human capital behind it?
Well, you tell us what is ACORN.
It may have more, ACORN may have more rebranded than necessarily having truly dissolved.
Okay. Well, what is ACORN?
Well, that would be my argument. It's almost like it's a philosophy. It's essentially, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Saul Alinsky, who wrote Rules for Radicals. But
no, I haven't read that.
That work, a pragmatic primer for community organizing. Yeah, I mean, Saul Alinsky is like the father of community organizing.
Mm-hmm.
But a gentleman by the name of Wade Rathke was able to put that vision to work, and that's why ACORN became so widely successful. And it using for 40 years it flew under the radar. But I think if people really want to kind of start to understand what ACORN is, imagine what Rainbow Push would be like if Jesse Jackson wasn't the face, but it's still an organization, and the face of Rainbow Push were old black ladies or old white ladies, or old ladies.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine what would happen if the National Action Network, if the face of that wasn't Al Sharpton, but little old ladies. And so that's kind of the same types of things, the same types of programs, the same types of militant direct action, the same types of direct action. Those things that these organizations do, ACORN does as well. But what allowed them to travel under the radar, to fly under the radar, was that there was no public face. And really, What happened was the fact that then, I guess, Senator Obama had been a trainer for ACORN out of Chicago. And once he became, we literally were looking at the possibility of having the first community organizer-in-chief. A spotlight was shined on ACORN that it had never experienced before. And that is it was almost inevitable with the
right. So in essence,
so Barack Obama became that face.
Right. And in essence, what you're saying, from what I read from the book and my honing in on what my understanding of the book is, and when I saw Bertha Lewis, I remember this lady speaking, this black lady, Bertha Lewis. No light was really shined on ACORN until black people became this Bertha Lewis CEO, as long as how do you pronounce their name?
Rathke.
Rathke? Rathke, okay. The Wade family was running this, and his brother Dale, who did, they claim, $1 million embezzlement. However, there's no I'm sure, paper trail as to how much embezzlement. This is a white family, by the way, that it wasn't a face to it until the black woman was appointed CEO, it appears, until Barack Obama, now president, got involved in it. But as long as it was started up in 1970, actually, and nobody, I mean, I didn't know about it, and these white people were the ones who were running it. However, the exploitation and the scapegoat appears to have become the black people when the embezzlement was the white Rathke family and their allies. Is that what happened?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
And that, see, the public didn't know that. And the public didn't know that because mainstream media, all they ever showed was this Louise lady, Bertha Louise, who they appointed after the scandal broke that all of the embezzlement happened. But the black people didn't do the embezzlement at all. But it led to the public to believe that it was the black people that did the embezzlement. And what a sham and a scam.
Right. Well, also, what happened was they the ACORN is a fascinating organization, and people try to paint it into a box with the Democrats, and people really don't understand what ACORN is. And honestly, ACORN is its own independent political action entity. But ACORN is not so much a Democratic organization. It aligns with Democrats. ACORN, if you may or may not be familiar with this regional political party called the Working Families Party, and it's in a lot of areas in the Northeast, Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey. It's strong there. ACORN is more so related to the Working Families Party, but because working families, the labor movement tends to align with Democrats, then people view it as a arm of the Democratic Party, which it's not. And so a lot of the information was actually misinformation. And so that was kind of what prompted me to write the book, to try to at least set the record straight or give another perspective on what was going on with ACORN from somebody who was actually inside the boardroom,
right,
and kind of knew what was true and what was false.
Absolutely. And the book really brings out some very powerful points because, like I said, I remember all of this, and I question a lot of things that mainstream media was saying back in the day in mid-2000 or so when the scandal first broke. I would question a lot of things that I heard, and I'm saying this doesn't even make sense. It doesn't sound right, what they were saying, and all the black faces I'm seeing. And I said, these black people could not have orchestrated this. The ones that I was seeing, the faces and so forth, and it just didn't seem logical. And when you start reading the book and you start putting things together and using your discernment and your common sense, you see straight through where the embezzlement came from and who really was doing the embezzlement when this organization was founded in 1970 to empower poor and middle-class people, to help them to understand the capitalistic system better, to help fight against corporate crime and fraud, white-collar crime, and all of this. But yet, they didn't do that. They used it for their own personal interests, and they exploited these poor people.
Right, and that was one of the one of the central premises of the book is that I can't remember my favorite quote, but Saul Alinsky talks about if you don't teach the underclass people, if you don't teach poor people, if you don't empower the people in the communities through community organizing, then essentially all you're doing is replacing one power class with another.
Right.
And so that's what happened. That's what was wrong with ACORN. It became a model that Reverend Hagee says, he calls it useful idiots. And that was never the real purpose of, that's not the purpose of community organizing. I mean, true community organizers, they ultimately want to empower the people in the communities. And so, but what was happening under the Rathke reign was that the people were essentially being used as a tool for them to gain more monetary so that was, and that's what we resisted. That's what the board members resisted. That's what ACORN 8 fought against. And that's where the battle lines were drawn.
Absolutely, and that's so, and you bring it out so well in the book. And we need to take a break, but before we take the break quickly, we want to have Marcel on the show because we want to talk to her, since this was she was a major part of this whistleblowing operation as well. And it says in there. Pardon me?
I think she's trying to dial in now.
Oh, is she? And I like the part about the unwritten rule. If she dials in, we'll get her on the phone, and we might not go to the break if necessary. But anyhow, I like this. It was the unwritten rule, from what I understand, from ACORN, and Marcel's leadership style, because Marcel was a powerhouse. She spoke up, and I like that, because we need people with integrity that's running these nonprofit organizations. And it appears that the unwritten rule of ACORN, which was the powerhouse of the white oversight of it, the Rathke family, was to control the membership and promote no strong or independent community leaders. That was it in a nutshell, what the Rathke, I guess you could say, regime was promoting. They did not want the leaders to be empowered because they were still in the money.
Right.
And that's sad.
Well, I think, to me, one of the most succinct ways to describe Marcel's role versus Bertha Lewis's role was, again, once Dale was busted on the embezzlement, and Wade was also kicked out for covering it up.
Yeah, he protected his brother and his family. They all were stealing. This white family was stealing the money and using minorities and poor people to further exploit them and their gain monetary advantages for themselves. That's exactly what they were doing, according to what I've read and what you guys are saying. And it must have proved true, because he admitted that his brother had embezzled money after he was uncovered. Prior to that, he didn't admit anything.
Right. No, that's pretty clean. But the point I'm trying to make is that at that point in time, ACORN was in turmoil, and the question became, which way was it going to go? So they brought in a committee to try to reform ACORN and do it the right way, and that was Marcel Reid and the ACORN 8. However, the staff members that had always been loyal to Wade, they were still kind of business as usual. And so when I hear people talk about Bertha Lewis and Marcel Reid, I tell people that Bertha wanted to be the new master. Marcel wanted to free the slaves. And that was all. That was the difference.
Say that again. Say that one again.
Who wanted to be the new master?
Who wanted to be the new master?
And Marcel was fighting to free the slaves.
You said Bertha Lewis wanted to be the new master, right?
Yep. She wanted to replace Wade.
And
Wade the master and overseer. So once we got rid of Wade, they moved Bertha in essentially to take his place.
Absolutely. And I sensed all of that in looking at I remember, like I said, seeing this woman on the CNN. I think she was on back in the day, and Fox News, I believe, and I sensed that. I mean, you can pick up on these things if you watch close enough and you observe people enough. I sensed that she wanted to be the new massa, as you say, and Marcel wanted to free the slaves. And we have so many, oftentimes a lot of these so-called black leaders, they are corrupt, and they need to be called out too. Many of them are corrupt. They're bought off, just like other ethnicities, because we are all of one human race from my perspective. But people are bought all the time. And it just, we need to start thinking about integrity, character, so that we can live in a more peaceful and harmonious society. And this is such, when I read this book, I tell you, it just brought back so many memories of what I remember with this ACORN situation. And it just didn't, the pieces didn't fit, but now they're starting to fit.
As they always do years later,
But at any rate, let's take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and have some final thoughts and let you tell us about the Whistleblower Summit that's coming up next month, July 27th through 29th. So let's take a quick break and come right back.
Yes, it's Aim to Purpose, the radio show, Race, Power, and Politics, a conversation with Michael McCray. Don't you go nowhere. This edition of Aim to Purpose, the radio show, is brought to you by L. Hicks Consulting Services. When you want the best in business coaching, life coaching, or perhaps your organization, business, or company is in need of a dynamic speaker for an upcoming workshop or seminar, contact Louise Hicks for L. Hicks Consulting Services at 1-562-310-1495. From anywhere around the world, that's 1-562-310-1495. For more information about Louise Hicks and her consulting services, visit her website at www.louisehicks.biz. Again, that's www.louisehicks.biz. Or call 1-562-310-1495. L. Hicks Consulting Services, where professionalism is top priority.
Okay, we are back, and in our final minutes here, we want Michael to briefly share with us the summit that's coming up July 27th through the 29th, and where is that going to be held?
Well, the Whistleblower Summit for Civil and Human Rights is held every year on Capitol Hill. So this year we're going to be at the Capitol Visitor Center. It looks like also we're going to have Busboys and Poets, the Stuart E. Mott House, and quite possibly the Library of Congress. We're still working on that. The purpose of the Whistleblower Summit is it was designed to create a community, a sense of community and mutual support for whistleblowers, but also to highlight how important whistleblowers are to society and to build better relationships between whistleblowers, advocates, and media. And so the reason that we're a little unique because after the whole ACORN debacle, members of the ACORN 8 started to organize a whistleblower conference because, again, Marcel and I, we're trained organizers, and we decided to apply that theory to organizing whistleblowers. And so, for years, we've been having various conferences in Washington, D.C. since 2007, 2008. But we kind of used a different methodology, which has become known as the Whistleblower Summit. Because one of the things, Louise, is that usually most people, like if I say the word whistleblower, most people will probably think of, I guess now, Edward Snowden. And a long time ago, there was a gentleman by the name of Daniel Ellsberg.
Right.
And again, most people tend to think of whistleblowers as white males.
Right.
So one is we wanted to tell people that, hey, they're black whistleblowers too. And the other thing is that most people view whistleblowing through the prism of public health and public safety. And so what we're saying is that whistleblowing is an exercise of free speech, and it's an important civil and human right. So it goes to the core of who people really are. And so the kind of my standard joke about this is that think back to the Rodney King incident and the calamity that followed that.
Right.
There are a lot of people out here that think that the videographer, the person who has the video of the Rodney King beating was a whistleblower, but Rodney King wasn't. We're like, no. Whistleblowing can be about other people. It can be about grand things. It can be about plant water. But, you can be a whistleblower in your personal life. It just depends on, are you speaking truth to power, and then are you exposing that either to, the proper authorities or to the media. And so we bring it home that way, and we start approaching it from civil rights and human rights. We're starting to get support of a lot of organizations that really you wouldn't think would be involved in whistleblowing.
Right, and so, that's good for the summit, and we're gonna have to wrap it up. But you said something about the theme for the summit is 1778, whistleblowers and the First Amendment. Why 1778? Because
the term whistleblower essentially was started in the 1970s, following with the gentleman I just said, Daniel Ellsberg, and the Pentagon Papers. The very first whistleblower law was penned on July 30th, 1778 by the Continental Congress.
Okay.
And so what we want to do is return whistleblowing to its proper historic context, where it was really a civic right, a civic duty for the people to go to Congress when there was malfeasance in their government. And that was written by the founding fathers. That was written it really is an adjunct to the First Amendment. And that's what we're trying to celebrate this year.
Okay.
Nice.
That's really good. And so just give us, know at your conference you're going to have something about a major initiative about the EEOC, and that's something that we can, when Marcel comes on, she can share more information, because we're going to have her on after this conference. So just give us some closing thoughts, and we really appreciate you sharing all this information with us. Quickly, a closing thought, because we're out of time.
Well, what I want to remind most people, well, everyone, is this. There is no free press without confidential sources. There is no government oversight. There is no congressional oversight without government informants. Whistleblowers are the fifth estate that protect freedom and liberty, and they need to be respected as such. They are true American patriots. And for more information, you can go to thewhistleblowersummit.com to get information about our conference. And if you're interested in what really happened to ACORN, go to www.acorn8.com. And Louise, thank you so very much for allowing me to be on the show with you.
And you had something, Ken? And we really thank you for coming on, and we're looking forward to having Marcel come back, and maybe you can call in and give us some more insight after this conference. Maybe it'll have to be probably the 1st of August or so, and we are looking forward to finding out more information as to what happens at that conference. And thank you so much for being our guest today. We appreciate you.
Thank you. I'm sure you're going to cover the conference, right?
Oh, yeah, we're going to talk about the conference. That's why we want you guys to come back, Marcel, to come on so we can talk about it. And if you give us information about it, we're going to be talking about it while the conference is going on during our show, but we'll need to get information. And we'll talk about it during that time as well, while it's going on. We'll be sharing hot topics about it, but you got to give us the information. And again, thank you so much for giving the insight. And I like that again. I'm going to say that again from Miss Tanya Ward Jordan. You said, put a purpose to your pain, everybody, okay? And until next week, always remember, your power lies within you. Let it loose.
Until next week.